Good afternoon. Welcome to the second invited ICM panel on how should we teach better. And I wish to apologise on behalf of Deborah Ball, who was going to be the moderator of this panel. Unfortunately, at short notice, due to illness in her family, she cannot be here in Seoul. Our thoughts are with her. So I became nominated to become the moderator as well as a panel member, and I'd like to introduce Keung and Jean-Marie Laborde. Could we... Next slide, thank you. No, the next slide. Oh, thank you. Keung sees himself as a mathematics teacher, and it's his love of teaching and love of his subject which will come through, I'm sure, in his contribution this afternoon. He studied at the University of Hong Kong and then worked with Hyman Bass in America before returning to Hong Kong in a career of teaching at the university there. That's what he told me to say, but actually I wrote the last paragraph because I know that Keung is extremely well known within the mathematics education community, and his wisdom and insight into cultural and historical matters is something that is well known. So despite his retirement, he continues to be active in these things. No? How's that going to work? Thank you. Jean-Marie, I'm sure, is well known to many of you in the audience as the inventor of the concept of dynamic geometry, and then establishing that through the well-known project Cabri, and many of you will have worked with Cabri. He became director of CNRS and led a team that developed Cabri from its very early stages, and he was particularly interested not just in Cabri, but in the whole concept of creating environments that enhance human learning. He worked with Texas Instruments, again, as many of you will know, and Cabri became extant on their graphics calculators, and he since then led the development of Cabri into 2- and 3-dimensional geometry. He's received honours, and I do want to mention the Légion d'honneur because it was 2 years ago in Seoul that Jean-Marie heard the news that he had been awarded this honour at the ICME conference here 2 years. It was a wonderful day, Jean-Marie. For myself, I have been a secondary mathematics teacher for a long time, and then including teaching mathematics in the Maori language, which is the indigenous language in my country, New Zealand. And after completing a PhD, I then moved into a very unusual position, being part of a mathematics education group within the mathematics department. So where I continue to teach mathematics, but my graduate work is with mathematics education. And I have been, the reason I guess I was invited, thank you very much, those who invited me here, was because I am the immediate past president of ICMI. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, I want to make two particular comments for this session. There are a lot of people here, and by the way, those people standing there are some free seats here. Feel free to come forward into these front seats. You're most welcome to do that. I want to make two comments because there are so many people here. We are anticipating that there will be a lot of audience participation, and indeed we're going to open it up for discussion for more than half an hour. So to do that, I just want to make 2 points that will try and focus any discussion a little bit. The first point is the principle of reflexivity. Within mathematics education, which is my field, there is a very important theoretical principle that as a mathematics educator, anything you say about teaching applies also to yourself. And I wish you to think about that when you say something about teaching, that you are also speaking about yourself. So if you say teachers need to something, then you're actually saying I need to. The second thing is that if we were to try and cover the topic, how should we teach better, for all mathematics education, we would be here well past the closing ceremony. So in order to try and focus that a little more, I ask that we attempt to keep a focus on undergraduate mathematics education. It will not be completely possible, I understand, but in general, this is a panel about trying to teach undergraduate mathematics better. We're each going to speak for 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm going to go first simply because my PowerPoint is on this. And then Keung will speak, and then Jean-Marie will speak for 10 to 15 minutes, no more. And then we will simply open it up to open discussion, and we do hope that you will offer your thoughts, not just ask questions. Depending on whether it's coherent or not, I will attempt to sum up at the end. Okay. So, I wish to make two comments, and really they are a series of questions, but from them you will understand where it is that I think some effort should be put in order for us to teach mathematics better. One of the things I like to talk about is the 14-year apprenticeship that we give mathematics students as mathematics teachers. From the age of 6 to the age of 20, that's the end of undergraduate, the 10 minutes, my 10 minutes has started now. We show students what to do, we show them mathematics, and we get them to practice it. We don't actually very much, and decreasingly I find, get them to do anything that remotely resembles authentic mathematics in the sense of what mathematics they will do after they graduate, whether they're research mathematicians or just using their mathematics in the business, industry, or any other world. It's really interesting that this occurs because it's quite a nice mind game to ask ourselves, well, what would that be like for a football player? Maybe in our schools we should get the children and say, well, you're allowed to practice kicking and passing, and maybe heading the ball and running with the ball, and practice kicking in a goal, but you're not actually allowed to play a game of football at all. And you're not allowed to play it at primary school, and we still don't think you're quite ready to play it at secondary school. And even after however many years of secondary school, actually you haven't practiced enough yet. You haven't got enough skills to actually play a game of football. You can't do that. You've got to do 3 more years of university practice before we'll allow you to do any real mathematics. And the same for a musician. Imagine if you had to practice the scales, reading music, a little bit of music theory, and you weren't actually allowed to play in any kind of performance until the end of 20 years. How many musicians would we have, I wonder? And I exaggerate the point, but you get what I'm trying to say, is that I think that we could significantly increase the quality of mathematics teaching if we found ways in which that those students who are in our care were encouraged to and be mentored through indulging in genuine or semi-genuine or semi-authentic mathematical activity. Any of you out there who feel they do this, I would love to hear, because it's something I've tried to do. I was at the Bridges conference yesterday, and they spoke, there was a magnificent dance performance, and in that mathematical dance performance, and in that performance somebody spoke about the many famous mathematicians who have talked about the way in which mathematics is like poetry, and unless you have the soul of a poet, you will never be a mathematician. I leave that for you to find the quote. And that creativity is essential. And I wonder how much time we spend fostering that in our students. The second point I wish to make about how we might think about making undergraduate mathematics better is to think about ourselves as professionals. And we are researchers, but half of our lives we are teachers. And like all good professionals, we should spend considerable amounts of time practicing and getting better, doing things that will improve our practice. You have a picture there of In-Bee Park, that's this morning. This morning she just won the famous Korean golfer. She's number 1, 2 in the world, I think, at the moment. And she just won the LPGA Wedgwood Championship this morning. I would like to ask all of you whether you think you spend half as much time developing your teaching per week as In-Bee Park does developing her golf. Half as much time, because I presume you spend the other half developing your research skills, one assumes. Do we do that? I challenge any of you to think, do you spend that amount of time, i.e. the amount of time she spends practicing in 1 week, do you spend that amount of time in 1 year developing your teaching in some way? I think in general, academics, and particularly mathematics academics, we do not do that. And I wonder whether this is something that we should think about. Okay, I now pass over to Man Keung Sing. Thank you, Sue, for his presentation. Can we swap back to... Thank you. And you might need this.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to modify. First of all, I'd like to modify the modify the title of the panel to "How Can We Teach Better?" The word "should" seems to suggest that there are some fixed rules for a teacher to follow. This is not true. I'm in no position to teach others how to teach either. Besides, good teachers come in all shapes and sizes, so that there's no one single way to teach better. However, bad teachers are easier to spot. Let me give an example from the semi-autobiography, Vie de Nicolas, by the 19th century French novelist Stendhal. The author recounted his school experience in learning mathematics. Dupuy, the most pompous and paternal bourgeois I have ever seen, was professor of mathematics without the shadow of any talent. But I was taught mathematics so stupidly that I made no progress. The great Monsieur Dupuy explained propositions to us as if they had been a set of recipes for making vinegar. I loved mathematics all the more because of my increased contempt for my teachers, Monsieur Dupuy and Chabet. Does that make them still good teachers? I don't know. In my view, continued by Stendhal, in my view, hypocrisy was impossible in mathematics. What a shock for me to discover that nobody could explain to me how it happened that minus multiplied by minus equals plus. This is one of the fundamental bases of the science known as algebra. Not only did people not explain this difficulty to me, but what was much worse, they explained it on grounds which were evidently far from clear to themselves. but it's the custom. Everybody accept this explanation why Euler and Laborde should presumably were as good as you are, accepted it. It seems you want to draw attention to yourself. As for Mr. Fourier, he treated my timid objections, timid because of his pompous way of speaking, with a haughty smile that verges on aloofness. Mr. Fourier exhibited two features of a bad teacher. He has no brain and he has no heart. In the 1950 book, The Art of Teaching by Gilbert Hayek, he states two important necessary conditions for one to make a good teacher. They may sound like cliché, but are true. First, can I make a mistake somewhere? I want the next one. Okay. First, a teacher must like his own subject. Novalis once said, the real mathematician is an enthusiast per se. Without enthusiasm, no mathematics. Second, a teacher must like his or her students. Edwin Morris once said, teaching is a very ambiguous interpersonal relation. The teacher is a performer, an expositor, a taskmaster, a leader, a judge, an advisor, an authority figure, an interrogator, and a friend. None of these roles are easy, and many of them are mutually incongruous. Thus, maturity as a teacher includes complex development of personality. We will not dwell further on these 2 points, but go on to talk more on teaching the subject. Teaching is to tell a story. A good story which arouses curiosity and excites imagination. A story about the long quest by the human mind for an understanding of the world around us. I'd like to discuss briefly 3 points. 1. L is M, less is more. 2. HPM, history and pedagogy of mathematics. 3. M and M, mathematics, education, and the mouse. So the first, L is M. Basic concepts that are to be learned in primary, secondary schools are not that many. And these basic concepts come up time and again throughout the primary, secondary level, even to the undergraduate level as well. It calls for the effort of the teaching community to design the teaching learning activities along the lines of these basic concepts. I will illustrate with an enlightening example taken from the project Mathematik 2000, led by the German mathematics educator Alex Wittmann and Gerhard Müller, which is in turn motivated by the 1975 paper and arithmogons by Alexa McIntosh and Douglas Quadling. To add the numbers of counters in 2 adjacent fields and write the sum of the box of the corresponding side. Now this is just kindergarten or junior primary level addition. A variation. Place counters in the 2 fields and a number in the box so that the numbers of counters in 2 adjacent fields add up to the number in the box of the corresponding side. This is junior primary level. Evolved subtraction. Harder. Place counters in each field so that the numbers of counters in 2 adjacent fields add up to the positive integer in the box of the corresponding side. This is junior primary level. It requires some thinking, but can use try and error to solve it. For instance, you start with this. Wrong. Wrong. Bingo. Place a positive integer in each field so that the integers in 2 adjacent fields add up to the positive integer in the box of the corresponding side. Always solvable. This would involve the fraction, and sometimes it would involve negative numbers. Now, at a high level, there are 8 counters in the lower left corner. The try and error would lead you to such a kind of thinking. There's A minus A. Okay. So, what you want is to solve an equation. This is junior secondary level. That B minus A plus A plus A equal to C, and you solve for it. At a senior secondary level, you can solve simultaneous linear equations, more systematic method, and it comes out like this. And if you notice the pattern, it may ring a bell if you think for other subjects, so other mathematical area. We'll come back to that later. So in general, the problem is play count in each field so that number of counters in two adjacent fields add up to the number in the box of the corresponding side. But mathematicians are greedy. They always want more. So they generalize. Place counters in each field so that the number of counters in two adjacent fields add up to the positive integer in the box of the corresponding side. Again, you can use try and error, and you can use and try. But this time, the solution is not unique. You can have many solutions. But you can use the same kind of technique. You set up an equation. However, this time it turns out that the result is A minus B plus C minus D equal to 0. Now it comes to undergraduate linear algebra, linear dependence, because there is a constraint. Undergraduate linear algebra, you rank of a matrix. This is a more systematic method now. Instead of just the system of linear equations, you now set up a matrix and you look at the rank. And it turns out the rank is equal to 3. So the system of linear equation has a unique solution. Well-known result in linear algebra. A more general problem would be that. Now comes the theorem. An n-I matrix with each row being a cyclic permutation of the preceding row, and with this first row as 1, 1, 0, 0, 0. Then the rank of n is either n when n is odd, and n minus 1 if n is even. Consequence, the system of linear equations is solvable for any given a 1 to an when n is odd and the solution is unique. The system is solvable even if there is a condition in the case of n is even, and under this condition there are infinite many solutions depending on a single parameter. So this is undergraduate mathematics. Then the geometric variation, which I raised a bit earlier. This is the geometric version of it, and then now you can see the mathematical meaning of all those constraints you have seen before. A plus C equal to B plus C, which is the condition for quadrilateral with a inside circle. And for a triangle, you only have a unique solution, but for a quadrilateral, you can have infinite many solutions if a solution exists. So my message is less is more. The basic principles are not that many, and it permeates through from kindergarten to undergraduate. The second, HPM. The basic tenet I hold is that mathematics is part of culture, not just a tool, no matter how useful this tool might prove to be. As such, the history of its development and its many relationships to other human endeavors, from ancient to modern times, should be part of the subject. And through my own experience in teaching and learning, I have found that knowledge of the history of mathematics has helped me to gain a deeper understanding and so improve my teaching. Now, integrating the history of mathematics with teaching is only one of many ways to do this. The history of mathematics may not be the most effective choice, but I believe that wielded appropriately, it can be an effective means. Despite its importance, history of mathematics is not to be regarded as a panacea to all pedagogical issues in mathematics education. Just as mathematics, so important, is not the only subject worth studying. It is the harmony of mathematics with other intellectual and cultural pursuits that make the subject even more worth studying. In this wider context, history of mathematics has yet a more important role to play in providing a fuller education of a person. So there's for a certain subtopic, we should have a historical perspective, mathematical perspective, and a pedagogical perspective. You have to know something about the history of mathematics, to have a solid base of knowledge in mathematics, and to focus on the pedagogy. Finally, M&M. A special issue of Newsweek in 2003 carries the cover, the headline, Bionic Kids, How Technology is Altering the Next Generation of Humans. One of the articles bears the title, Log On and Learn, in which 2 points very attention. Children's brains are growing adept at handling a variety of visual information. Kids are getting better at paying attention to several things at once, but there is a cause in that you don't go into any one thing in much depth. So my questions I'd like to raise are, how should IT be employed to enable students to learn better, but not to limit their ability to think critically and in depth? How can we ensure that a discovery approach is not to be equated with a hit and miss tactic? How can we ensure that imaginative thinking is not to be equated with a cavalier attitude, that multitasking needs not be identified as sloppy and hasty work, and that the use of IT is not to be identified as following instructions step by step without thinking? I once wrote a paper. The title is Mathematics, Education, and the Mouse is taught even in 2005. Finally, I'd like to conclude by showing you a design from the famous puzzle and graphic designer of Korean ethnic Korean American, Scott Keung, on this is teach, and then you read it is to learn. Therefore, teach and learn are just 2 sides of the same coin. Before the PowerPoint is common, I used to use it as a transparency. So I would say, learn and teach are 2 sides of the transparency when you flip it over. Well, in Chinese, ancient classic is the same thing. In the Li Ji, 2,000 years ago, teaching and learning help each other, as is said in the Charles to Year. Teaching is the half of learning. They complement each other, and learning is teaching, and teaching is learning. So thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for being here, and I feel so honored to have such opportunity to speak at ICM. So I'd like to participate to this panel, but focusing somehow on the technological aspects of everyday modern teaching. And actually, the main points I'd like to touch very rapidly are, first of all, that technology and equation actually is not new. Nevertheless, it's still debated whether technology is of any value in math education. We have to constate some kind of alarming poverty of the majority of so-called educational math resources, especially on the web. I am calling for a need for a radical change at political and economic levels to secure some kind of sustainable educational software industry. And also, I think that we need to have a real start at reducing the gap between what math students can achieve with modern technology, with digital technology in math, versus what they are actually asked to, the kind of problems or of exercise they are asked to solve at standard, in the most standard places at the level of assessment. Technology is not new, and actually today the digital technology seems to have an especially high potential At ICM92, so some times ago, in Canada, Jim Caput insisted that the introduction of any new technology in education has always been a battle. Recall, at least in France, I remember, the introduction of metallic feathers instead of the very old real feather to learn how to write. Or later, the same story about ballpoint pens. So if gentle items of that type produce a battle, so no mystery that the eruption of digital technology in the classroom means a lot of detractors. Among preceding crucial technology in education, I would like, of course, to mention the start of the writing, but here we have to mention the printing. Printing, actually, here we have the first at Jishki in Korea. This is the most ancient book in the world, printed with mobile characters. And it was found not so far from here, a little bit south, from Seoul. And currently, by the way, this book at the beginning was not recognized as such important, and it was given to the French people, and currently it's at our national library in France. Sometimes it's for sure come back to Korea. I'd like also to speak about computer in education. Computer in education, for instance, these kind of things were designed by French caricaturist Albert Robida. This one also is quite interesting. So you see the kind of teleteaching invented in, so at least thought of in at the end of the 19th century. Here, something of the same type in some kind of school ATMs. Look at what's happening on the left here. It's still debated whether technology is of any value, and this is important because I'd like to mention at least two international studies, one in the US, one in Spain. The one in the US actually is more about standard activity on the internet, essentially what we would call Math TV, where students are essentially passive. And what the result of the study is that that it's not negative, it's not positive. It was no change, but actually it was no change about what students have learned in being simply exposed to digital math resources. And another study here in Spain, which has some significance because it was for 6 years and with 16,000 students, so it's not a small scale study. And here, the result about a control group using 4 very interactive kind of software, so going from CAS, dynamic geometry, spreadsheet, the positive result has been about 25%, and around geometry, with dynamic geometry, it was almost 30%. So, this is important, I think. In his talk, in his press conference Manjul Bhargava was expressing something very important, I think. He said that math has not to be taught in a robotic way, because in most of the cases, it's like, here is a problem, and here is how to solve it. It's not interactive or artistic. In contrast, he said, students must be able to discover the playfulness behind math and problem solving. And this, of course, has been considered worldwide. I have no time to go. So, Martin Grotschel was finishing his important thing here and saying, no time to elaborate on these claims. So, I have no time to elaborate on those claims either. So, besides PISA and TEAMS research, I think that it would be very important to focus more also on another the OECD Skills Outlook, which is concerned with achievement in science of adults, not just students, but adults. And there, one of the main points is that most of our people in all the different countries participating to this study has strong, serious difficulty about managing proportionality. I will jump about the poverty of what we can find on internet. Here I'd like to at least mention that the development of authentic professional math resources is something which is not so easy, and recently the situation is not so good, because if we take the example of France, we have companies disappearing. In the US, one of the most, if not the most innovative publishing house has closed before transferring his technology to a major group, where it's currently, I would say, more or less dying. In many countries, limited budget outside the show-off of politicians is an encouragement for teachers and other educators to look for free resources, cloned or pirated. This is the case in France, in South America, in Russia, and China. This is too bad. We have to develop research-based software critics to augment the awareness of teachers about what makes the difference between valuable and not valuable educational software. Here also I will be very fast. We need, for a start, introducing the discrepancy between the kind of math knowledge students can achieve and what they are asked to solve at the final exam. Simply to mention that after the recent baccalaureate in France, students were outraged. They said, "Oh yeah, you are given cubes, and at the exam they put you a regular tetrahedron only isosceles right at A, cut by a plane. It's unfair." Because he said we have to think it's unfair. So then, what can interactive technology bring to learning? I'd like to show one or two examples. How much time?
Yeah, 5 to 6 minutes.
5 to 6 minutes, that's perfect. I will be in time. It's very rare, you know.
We'll see at the end.
Here, I'd like to present this situation that is in first primary school student. The dog and its kennel. The task is, could you construct a dog kennel and put the dog inside? And here the student has some tiles of that type. He can take some of them. Of course, the students can have. It's possible that the students have been introduced to the manipulation of those things somehow before. You see, as soon as they stick, you can move them at once, or you can also move them in rotating this them like that. They will. The idea is to create some kind of 3D box, yeah, to put the dog, the dog here, the dog inside, yeah. The dog is can be big or small, but keep it small. And some students will remember that to create a cube, the box, at least to start with a box, a cubical box, it's a good idea to have 1, 2, etc. 6 sides. And he will try something with something like this, because he has seen this somewhere. And let's try if it would be successful with this. He do that, and now it's possible for him to test what he was doing. My mouse. Oh yeah, my mouse is now. So it's possible for him to try in 3D and have this one here, and here it doesn't work. Here there is one too much on this side, one top too much, and he could reopen the thing and make another attempt. And why not this time? Because so I will jump some in between steps, but the second attempt he might be very much clever and do something like this. And because this was wrong there, thinking he might consider that this will close all the 4 sides, of the box, and now I need something more elegant than simply a top, a flat top. I will put some of course, it's probably not all students in primary that will immediately manage to do that, but they might be engaged in this. And if the students would be very clever, because instead of putting the last one somewhere here, that would be a good idea, he might put it here, and you will understand why. It's more clever to put it here. And now try to close the box like this, clack, and clack, and the tops, little bit here, and this one here, and maybe this one down gently. And still time to put the dog and close the box. And if you open the box, you understand why it was clever to put this last piece connected to the other blue pieces, because if not, it would open at the same time the roof and the face. So I'm thinking. So my next example will be very, very short. So it's how to construct the ICM logo. I won't go what was written. I suppose everybody has read this. It's based on the golden spiral, so a logarithmic spiral, and I'd like simply to do something very quickly. Here, I'd like to approximate actually the golden spiral with consecutive square, or better, in my case, quarter of circle. Let me construct a perpendicular line to this here, like this line. I could look at this in 3D, because sometimes it gives me a better impression, because normally when you are working on your sheet of paper, the students are working sheet of paper, the paper is like this in front of him, not like that. So it means that the circles, they look not exactly as, so they have to be interpreted to be seen as circles. And take a compass here, and make an arc of circles like this. This would be the first start of my construction. So of course this line segment here has been constructed as being having the length of the big circle divided by the golden number. And because I have no time, I will simply continue my construction using what we call a macro, something that students can design from a previous construction. And here you should I need to add a line segment. By the way, I have no line segment here. Nevertheless, I will restart from the beginning here. Let me start do the second and the third one, etc. And you obtain each time you click on the line segment, it creates the next step on the of your spiral. And finally, you also what is missing here is still some balls, like in the ICM logo, some balls moving on the curve. And to install those balls, of course, the students will have to think a little bit, how would it be possible to put, first of all, on a line segment, a successive of points, but their distance has to diminish according to the change from A to B, the change has to be in the ratio of the golden number. How to manage to obtain such a construction? Here it is realized, and finally, the result will be this one. When you animate the points, and actually, what competence are fostered in those examples? I would like to mention some of them. Anticipation and prediction. What if? Clear evidence that something does not work and understanding why from feedback. This is what was happening with the box and the dog. Take advantage of displayed information to find how to remedy. Again, this is what was happening in the case of the dog in the box. Flexibility, of course, creativity, modeling. Here it's interesting because we start from something existing in the nature, some kind of notile shell. It has been modeled in mathematics using a logarithmic spiral. Actually, in our case, with the factor of the golden ratio. But this curve, reversely now, is itself modeled as an approximation with successive circle arcs. The students might also search for other ways. In math, there is not just one way. When I was a child in France, I was taught that math is very easy because there is just black and white, correct and wrong. And that's absolutely not the case, as you probably have experienced as a researcher. Here we have also an interesting creative way of using geometry to create illusions at display level, exactly as it is the case in computer animation or contemporary digital graphics. And the last one, but that's not the last one actually, I'd like to mention, say, sensibility to art and culture. The A that some people may put together, put today in the STEAM. So I'd like to really thank you all and 감사합니다.
We have, of course, saved time because we had an extra quarter of an hour, which was Deborah Ball's, which we haven't even used up, so we're ahead of time now. I would like to hand over to you for questions, or we are also very happy to take comments or thoughts about the issue of how we might teach better with the ideas kept in mind of reflexivity and a main focus on undergraduate mathematics. There are 2 microphones there, and I believe there is at least one being held, and you have one too. So there's one on each side. If you put up your hand, and then go from there. Please can you identify yourself?
Thank you so much. I'm Gizem Karali from the United States of America. This was a very stimulating discussion. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask Professor Laborde, right, to show his slide about the ICM logo where he actually summarizes how to do it again. I couldn't take his picture. I'd like to see it. And I'd like to add to Professor Siu's comment about incorporating history into your classes. I've been doing this for a while. It's been fascinating, very successful. On top of that, I have also tried to incorporate poetry in my classes and literature and philosophy, like Professor Barton. And I find that my students find this refreshing in a mathematics class, even though they have always thought math is procedural and all of that, but it actually has this human part to it, related to our culture and deeply related, actually, deeply intertwined. Thank you.
Thank you. Was that the slide you were wanting, or the previous one?
The description before that.
This one?
This one. The long one.
This one?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes.
This
Thank
one?
you.
The previous.
Who's next?
This one. Thank you so much.
Right at the back, and then the person.
Hello everyone, my name is Abhi Bagasar. I'm coming from the University of Derby, United Kingdom. I've been teaching mathematics for a while, but now for 2 years in England. My university is quite a small one, and it allowed me to interact with students of very different abilities. And this allowed me to reflect quite a lot on how I'm teaching mathematics, and even when I was preparing for the job interview, I came across a book which was very interesting called Best Answers to Tough Interview Questions. Now I'm talking about that during every open day when I meet students for the first time. And I discovered many things about myself as a mathematician from that book. I didn't learn any answer to the interview questions. But what I liked about that book was the following thing in the preface. It was saying that every employer is looking after the same skill. I thought, how come? And that skill was problem-solving skills. And then I said, wait a minute, actually I've been doing this forever. I'm doing this on a daily basis as a mathematician. So I think mathematicians in general should be in a very good position to get any sort of job. And now, related to my teaching experience, one thing I'm also doing during my open days is to ask the students the following question. How many of you are afraid of mathematics? And usually 90% of the students raise their hands. And I say, how many of you find mathematics difficult? All of them raise their hand, and I also raise my hand. And then tell them, you know, there's some good news about this, because Einstein was also finding mathematics difficult. And I think whenever you teach mathematics, I think it's very good to be honest. It's very good not to oppose as an invincible genius who knows everything about mathematics. I think it's very good to offer the students all the help you can. So to show them, guys, you find mathematics difficult, I find mathematics difficult. There are times when I hate mathematics. There are times when I spend nights being very frustrated. So I try to show them that I'm in the same boat. And I'm trying to, whenever I'm teaching something, I'm trying to give them some break all the time. So that's why they like the jokes, the mathematical jokes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's interesting, the issue about all employers wanting problem solving. Of course, they're not speaking of mathematical problem solving, but for teachers, they're interested in solving the problems of teaching, which is a different matter. Thank you. There's one person here, and then I'll come back to you. And could you pass the microphone here?
I have an experience of teaching mathematics with LCD projector, PowerPoint presentation in the Middle East, some universities are Middle East, and even in India. Generally, students don't like that due to different reasons. What is the experience in other parts of the world, like US or Europe?
For me, and I'm going to ask the other panelists to comment on that, because I think your question, your comment raises an interesting question as to when we should change our teaching behaviour because of what the students like. That's a very interesting question. Keung, do you want to say anything about that?
I might have not get the question correctly. Is it, Professor, are you saying that the usual way is by chalk and talk, and then now some teachers switch to using PowerPoints, and then the students don't like it? Is that the question or the comment? Yeah. Okay. Now my
and they resist it. They usually teach like that.
My experience with this is that I don't like to teach by PowerPoint either, because you tend to go in quickly, and students would just they will pretend to be doing something to take a note, but you would never know, because now they can go on net anytime, so they can do their own things. But I would prefer using chalk and talk, because I can then show my way of thinking all along. However, having said that, I would say that those new technologies have its use, and it's important, and it is a significant help when it comes to the point that one uses it appropriately. So I'm not opposing or agreeing completely with either one, but it depends on the situation and the context.
Let us stay let us stay on this point for a moment, either the way in which we teach or the general issue of when we should alter our behaviour because of what the students want. Does anyone, I will come back to you in a moment, but unless what you want to say is on that point. If not, we'll just hold it and I will come back.
Yeah, maybe I add a
Just applied mathematics, where there are many pictures are involved, and you want to explain three-dimensional figures and other concepts in 3 dimensions. Perhaps the LCD projector will give the help of the computer one can take.
So you're reinforcing the idea of appropriate use. Anybody else?
May I add a remark to Bill's question? Yes, it is true that today there is a trend that you have to appease the students, and it's because in this world of consumerism. But my view is that even if you think that way, one has to be very careful, because the students are not only consumers, they are the product of the consumerism. So ultimately, you are going to turn out these products. They are not just paying for the customer. They are not just the customer. They are also the product, and therefore we have, as you mentioned, we have to be very careful in considering this question.
I would like to use your comment to come back to the principle of reflexivity, because I think just as students have habits that they like, I think lecturers have habits that they like too, and maybe chalk and talk is one of them. And we should be analysing these habits in a rational way, and not just saying, well, they're the habits. When in my university, the university moved to remove all chalkboards from all teaching spaces because of the level of technology that was there, and the chalk was actually destroying the technology very quickly. There was a huge outcry because the lecturers, particularly in the mathematical sciences, simply would not contemplate teaching without the chalkboard. And then slowly we got around to say, well, what is it about the chalkboard that you like? And of course, it's the ability to be able to write in real time for the students to see it. Well, you can do that with a whiteboard, you can do that with a document camera, and these things were both available on multi-screens, and in fact, they had enhanced ability to do the thing they wanted to do, but their reaction was, no, we've got to have a chalkboard. So there's interesting questions there that we have to ask ourselves about the habits we get into, I think. Unless there's any more comment on that on this point?
Yes.
Thank you, James. Good. I will come back to you, I haven't forgotten. Yeah.
James Laborde, University of Bath. 2 points on this. One is I'm the only lecturer in first year mathematics to use the projector, all the rest use the blackboards, and in fact I've permanently marked down for that because I'm different. The second is I was at another university where they were busy removing the blackboards in favour of whiteboards, and I did a comparative exercise in the presence of the administrators. I wrote the definition of Euler's gamma on a blackboard and used 1/24th of the surface area. I wrote on a whiteboard and used half the surface area. There are issues about the quality of space as well as the medium.
Indeed, if I was... Yeah, we won't get into this argument now. Thank you. We're going to change the topic now, I think. Yes, back to this gentleman here.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Barton from Cochin University, India. I endorse what Bill told about improvisation of teaching. Let me tell you that mathematics is a universal language, but teaching of mathematics cannot be universalized. Because at each stage or each country, we get students for studying mathematics at different levels. What is happening in India is that after 2 years of schooling, the rejected lot is coming to undergraduate mathematics, who did not get admission for engineering. So though I teach in the university, what I do is to go to schools and create an excitement in learning of mathematics by telling them where you are going to apply certain mathematical things. One of the very difficult questions which I have found convincing the students is what Professor told, to explain how minus into minus is plus. So this is a very intricate question which even a 6th standard student in India is going to attack.
You need to be quite quick here to let other people.
So my appeal to all my fellow mathematicians or mathematics teachers is to create an excitement in the learning and teaching of mathematics so that more students will come to mathematics. And I know that it is not an easy task. I would also request you to read the 10 Commandments of George Fourier on how to become an effective teacher. Thank you.
Thank you. There's someone. And just while we're waiting there, I intend to open up the discussion on the use of technology in teaching for the final 10 minutes of this discussion. So if you have comments on that, please save them for then. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Moderator from Kenya, University. We all appreciate you are from different areas and our students are from different perspectives. We have the learning skills we are using here, mostly we don't have many in Africa. So I would love to use that, but you find most of the students, maybe they are learning computers, maybe at high school level or university. However, personally, what I have always done when I teach, I use local examples. Instead of just telling a student about Pythagoras theorem, I start giving them a story. You want to walk to a certain shopping center, would you rather go around or would you rather go straight on? It is from that perspective. Then I will tell them, this and this person discovered the following theorem. Okay? So I would also want to enhance, let us use the local examples so that students can identify what's happening around before being told that somebody else did it. Okay? When you use difficult or big names, the students get scared from the word go. But when you use the local examples, they identify before you tell them the theory behind. Thanks.
Thank you. There is a tension, isn't there, between mathematics as the context-free discipline and mathematics as a context-rich discipline. And as teachers, we have a changing balance, I think. Comments on this issue? The use of real-life examples in mathematics or the non-use of those? I'd be interested in other people's views. Thank you. And then...
Yes, I fully agree that examples should be related to the specific interest of students. I'm teaching students from 4 programs in the same course, computing students, and I gave them in the first lecture an example coming from a problem which was asked by some students to set up their own games company. And it was a nice geometry problem, and this is how I introduced the need for some knowledge in linear algebra. I told them, guys, if you want to follow the steps of your colleagues and develop your own business, you might have to get some knowledge in this area. So I think it helped the students.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you pass to somebody over here? Thank you. Or go into the centre. Those microphones work.
My name is Zhi. I graduated from Tsinghua University in China, but I'm teaching in Virginia State University in USA. Virginia University is a very diversity, which is a very special type of university. My question is that, because I very like the Dr. Su's learning and teaching two sides of the process. So in teacher part, we love the subject, we love the students, but for our students, maybe a bit different. So my question is to all of you, do you believe all students in mathematics class can learn math?
Thank you. Responses?
Yes.
Go. Oh, yes is the answer.
Yes is the answer.
Do we have contrary opinions here? At all levels? Graduate levels? Yeah, Mina.
I have a question that is maybe more specified than the question that you asked. It's known that maybe not known. There are students and even researchers that have more inclination to geometry and students that have more inclination to algebra. Do you think that if we address these two groups separately, we will teach better, and especially shall we, in that way, maybe we make the gap between high school and undergraduate smaller?
The issue of specialization. Thank you. You can answer.
Okay.
Don't talk to me.
Oh, I'm not. I just want to make clear the question. I may not listen to it too clearly. Are you saying that some people are more inclined to geometric thinking and some people are more inclined to algebraic and analytical thinking? So that whether we should cater to their needs? Is that?
I understood the question very well.
Okay. Now, my experience with this is that, first of all, I should say that I sometimes, for many years, I have been biased in thinking that geometric thinking is much better. And so, for instance, if when I taught linear algebra, I would usually show them the geometric side of it. But then only finally one day a student came to me, and then from what the dialogue between us, I found out that it's not true at all, because some people may not have that kind of inclination. So they would say, why don't you just show me the analytical way of doing it? So first of all, I think one should not dictate which side. And then I also learned from the theory of Groteschi. In his book, he said there are three ways, roughly: the geometric, the analytic, and the harmonic. And the harmonic is the integration of the two, the geometric and the analytic. And then from another mathematician, Dubinsky, he has a theory that if you notice that a student is strong in geometric thinking, then you should try to encourage the other side, the analytic thinking, while vice versa, which I think is better than if we simply cater to one side, because it's impossible in a class there are students of different inclination.
Yeah. And that comes within mathematics education, the theory of versatility, and thinking versatility is one of the things we should aim for. That's what's suggested.
Yeah, just in addition to what was already said, I'd like to stress that actually in the ancient time, say Descartes, geometry, to be a geometer was synonymous to be a mathematician. And my view, my thinking, my feeling is that actually there is not such a big difference between being inclined to geometry versus to more algebra. This is truly just the same world. And for instance, today in most of the domain in mathematics, the geometric visualization, the mental imagery is always playing such a very crucial role in the way you can understand and figure out ways to solve a problem or to get some insight. So the geometric approach to a problem is, even if it's very abstract, is still there. So I would not oppose the two way of thinking.
Thank you. I'm going to, in a moment, turn the discussion, and for the last 10 minutes, I would like us to discuss the issue of technology. Quickly, while you're thinking about that, my answer to your question, actually, again, is to give the reflexive thought. I find it such a powerful principle. And ask, can all students learn mathematics? Can all of us be teachers? That's an interesting question. Okay, could we have, please, reactions to the technological issue? Is that what? Thank you. And there, and there's one over here. If we could pass that. There's two over there. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Sophie Burrell from Simon Fraser University. I had a little bit of experience with kind of technology on the other side, doing more like a flipped class, and I was just wondering what other people have had experience with that. Like, is it working well for you or not? I've mostly been teaching sort of like pre-cal and really preparatory classes, and I'm looking forward to doing it more at higher levels, and just wondering, like I've really had to use technology in order to get the material across beforehand, and I'm just wondering, is that working for anyone else?
So that's good. I'm happy to talk with you about that experience. Over here, and then we'll come back to the
Thank you.
carry on.
Okay, thank you. My name is El Sharawi. I'm from Sultan Qaboos University of Oman. I would like to ask a question about finishing the curriculum with understanding or with this understanding versus not finishing the curriculum with more understanding. And here, it is related to using technology because always I can slow down and use technology to enhance my teaching and give examples and simplify things and motivate things. But in that case, when I slow down, I will not be able to finish the curriculum. On the other hand, I can plan to finish the curriculum, but in that case, I need sometimes to rush, and that will make this understanding for students. So the issue is how to balance between the two.
Thank you. If somebody is...
I think one of the questions is evaluation. If you want to use computers to teach, you have to use computers to evaluate the students. And this creates many problems. Because if you want that each student has a computer that is functioning, that is it's really a huge problem. For myself, I've convinced my authorities that it was more cheap to evaluate mathematics exactly. And when you have all the logistics after that, the experiment is that it is really conclusive because the students are motivated to learn how to do mathematics with computers. And they can do great things with that. But if you don't evaluate, you have replaced talk and show by nothing. And you lose something.
Thank you.
I'm Alex Tam from City University, New York. Professor Laborde mentioned several times, sort of hinted at that mathematical software and technology really doesn't have the quality that you would expect from, say, 2014, and sort of mentioned that the economics and political situation should change to reverse that. And I was wondering if you could expand upon that point.
I'm going to ask Jean-Marie to finish up this discussion, and he will remember that question, I hope. But just hold on in case there's time for one or two more comments about technology, and then I will ask Jean-Marie. About technology?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would like to respond to her question. In fact, I had a chance to use Maple in the calculus class. In fact, our calculus becomes a full credit hours. So we have 1 credit hour to design it, use Maple to understand the concepts and the problems joined from the other disciplines. Because we have very few mathematics majors, but our most students from engineering, other disciplines like physics, chemistry, and so for each after the concept introduced in calculus, we have corresponding problem from other disciplines and use Maple to solve it. It's great experience for students. They understand more why they learned those concepts in calculus. I think on the concept that if just use math, the students are unable to solve this problem.
Yeah.
But by using Maple package, they can explore the steps and understand the procedures, and then they can understand that.
Thank you. Final contribution from the floor on the issue of technology. No? Jean-Marie.
difficult to sum up the interesting contributions, but my feeling is that there is probably, when you speak, if I'm speaking again in the perspective of technology, that there are different components in this concept of technology in education. There are this kind of technology that some of you have been mentioning, that to go for a chalkboard or not, replacing them with a whiteboard or etc. This is kind of the use of technology as there the technology is simply just essentially an appendix, it's not crucial. There is some kind of technology in the form of external software, where the software can play a really crucial role for students to understand and to learn mathematical concept and learn to become at his level, at her level, some kind of mathematician. In fostering discovery, math rigor, the necessity of proving what it means to a third dimension in math software is the kind of, it was just mentioned at the end, the kind of professional software. Professional software for mathematicians. Some of them have been cited, I would say, so some of advanced DGS, advanced dynamic geometry system, or advanced computer algebra system. Those software very often are designed by and for mathematicians. You can use them if you are already a mathematician. It's difficult and it's a challenge. It's interesting to think about how can we turn those professional software in tools to be used by learner, because a learner in mathematics can have an attitude of mathematician, but he's not a mathematician yet. And I'm turning back to this question of assessment. Yeah, the assessment is as long assessment is not with digital technology. There is no need to use digital technology in the classroom, because it will be such a gap between the two things. It would cost. This is the problem. Probably a lot of money. This is the reason we have really trouble in convincing our MOEs, our policymakers, that this is needed to find the way to integrate the digital technology even at the level of assessment. And yes, this to some extent is my answer to your question about what can we do. I have to confess that it's until now we are a little bit poorly equipped to really succeed in convincing our government to really take this question in. Martin Gröschel in his talk the other day was mentioning that the necessity of enhanced math teaching for the 21st century is a real endeavor. It's a real part of the actual content of the next century, for the current century. But unfortunately, at the same level, somehow politicians are not always aware of this. This is what he was saying, and also, to some extent, also mathematicians very often are probably, I don't know exactly the reason, but they are not aware about the need of so much mathematics for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for Jean-Marc. I agree very much with you that there are superficial use of technology and deeper use of technology. Such for like word processing. It's not just make you type faster. It changes your writing habit altogether, for instance. So in mathematics, there's a deeper one which you emphasize. My question is just how do you see those worries I have regarding to the attitude of the students, which I raised in my third part of the talk.
Thank you. I'm going to leave that question hanging because we need to leave time to move to other rooms should people wish to do that. As a final comment, there's no way I can sum up the complexity of trying to think about how mathematics education is better Although I would like to reflect a little bit that the issues that Jean-Marie has just raised with respect to technology and the opportunities it offers us, not just to do what we always do, perhaps more efficiently and better, but it actually offers the possibility of doing completely new things mathematically that we would want to do. I wish to say that the same applies to mathematics education as a field. I think that mathematics education as a field offers a lot of theory and a lot of ideas, and some of them were mentioned by the woman over here at the flipped classroom, which offer opportunities for us to do things that we couldn't do before, and to think about why lectures are useful and what they're not useful for, and to change our habits in a rational way if we want to do that. But your metaphor, the metaphor is completely correct. Us maths educationists cost money too. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you.